Alright, you should have your packet 7 out. We're in biochemistry now, and we're talking about the chemistry, which is when we talk about elements in the periodic table. We're talking about what the chemistry is for life, because again, the chemistry for biology. Biochemistry. We're going to go take a look at this early Earth chart again, and we're really only going to need to take a look at the first 3 steps, and remember, just take a look at these, put these in the back of your mind for the later on in the video. They're definitely going to show up again, and it's going to be great if you can remember them. So you have the first step, Earth, you know, the hot ball of iron, cools off a little bit. There's only toxic gases, there's some water vapor in the air, and there's certainly no O2. You have Earth's surface starts to cool, it starts to lose some energy. Water vapor forms the oceans, right? As that water vapor cools in that atmosphere, it's going to condense and then form oceans as it rains. Then the third and final step that we care about is going to be simple organic molecules, such as amino acids and carbohydrates, forming from thunderstorms. Now remember, in the previous video I talked about how that happens, right? So any kind of molecules rearranging themselves are going to need energy to break those bonds and then form new ones, right? So a lightning storm, obviously electricity can provide all of that energy and more to recombine those molecules. So we're going to go through this part of the cell, or this last part of the list should be review for our other units, so we're not going to worry about it right now. So we're worried about how we're going from simple molecules, simple inorganic molecules, to complex organic molecules, right? The building blocks of life. So on Earth today, living things are the main source of organic compounds. So what that means is almost all organic compounds that we have on Earth are found within living things. So what is an organic compound? We talked a little bit about this in class, but I don't want you to think about the grocery store about how buying organic vegetables or anything like that. An organic compound in our class is going to be anything that has the element carbon and hydrogen in it. An inorganic compound is going to be any other element or any other molecule that does not contain carbon and hydrogen together. So an example would be CO2. Is CO2 organic or inorganic? You should have said organic or inorganic because it does not have carbon and hydrogen in it. Are these organic or inorganic compounds? The first one is going to be acetic acid. And that's going to be organic because you see here, you see the C and the H here together. The second one, sulfur diacid or silicon dioxide, is going to be inorganic. We don't see a C and we don't see an H. This last one, the alcohol group here, you can see the ethanol is going to be an organic compound because you see the C's, you see the carbons, and you see the hydrogens binding together. So the 4 most abundant elements in living things are going to be hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon. So you should know those letters that represent those elements, and they all are very conveniently the first letter in the words. So hydrogen is obviously an H, oxygen is going to be represented by an O, nitrogen is going to be represented by an N, and carbon is going to be represented by a C. These are the elements that are found in the following 4 organic compounds. And these are going to be the 4 that we talked about in class, so hopefully you remember. You have proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids. So if you took a little chart and you made an organic building blocks, right? If you only dealt with the hydrogen and the carbons, you would be able to make the hydrocarbons. Those are going to be very rudimentary. Then once you bring in your oxygen molecules, using your hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, you can start making carbohydrates and lipids. Once you bring in your first nitrogen, you can start making amino acids and proteins, because once you have the nitrogen, the oxygen, the carbon, the proteins, or the hydrogen, that's going to be all you need to make your first basic amino acids. Sulfur, or silicon, is going to be in there as well for amino acids and proteins. And then you bring in your last phosphate. So your phosphate, your nitrogens, your oxygens, your carbons, your hydrogens are all going to combine together to create those nucleic acids, that DNA and that RNA. Those very important things. Just a little disclaimer, there are some exceptions obviously to the rule, just like everything in biology. Your atoms of iron and copper and magnesium are going to be found in some proteins, but those are more exceptions, so we don't have to worry about them. Your autotrophs. Now, we should know what autotrophs do. They should all be reviewed. Just plants that are able to make their own organic compounds from inorganic compounds. So this equation right here, we should all be familiar with it. Photosynthesis. Now, the special part of this equation is what plants are able to do is to take those inorganic compounds, that CO2, or that CO2, that H2O, those inorganic compounds, and then convert that into organic glucose. So those C's and those H's and all combined together here in that glucose, creating organic compound from inorganic reactants. Now, heterotrophs are going to be responsible for doing the opposite. We take those organic compounds and then we turn them into inorganic compounds. But those we need to create the energy, and we also need those for the building blocks to then go back into our bodies, right, to help us grow. If we want to work out, we need the extra proteins, the extra organic stuff to help our muscles grow. But we also need the food on a very basic level just to create ATP. So we do the opposite. We take the organic and bring it back into inorganic. So as of today, almost all organic compounds on Earth are formed biotically. So that means that all of the organic compounds that we have, all of the glucose, all of the things that are binded C and H, almost all of them are found from, are created by living things. So how did those organic compounds even come about in the first place if there was no living things, right? Because if you didn't have organic compounds, you definitely did not have living things to make organic compounds, because all living things are found or are created with organic compounds. So in this case, the chicken definitely came before the egg, right? We know organic compounds came first, but how were they created? So I want you to think back to that early Earth list here. And we're going to look at the Miller and the Urey experiment. So I'm going to give you the description of this experiment first, and then I'll try to do my best to explain. But this is going to be to answer how the first organic compounds were formed, right? So this is on primordial Earth. So step one. We're trying to represent the conditions on very early Earth, where we have the idea that organic compounds were able to be formed. Step one, you have the oceans here represented by the H2O. You have the water vapor being burned off. So everything in the atmosphere, you have the water vapor. Then you allow in some methane and then some NH3 to be in the atmosphere environment. So that's all going to go into here, into this electrical channel. And then what Miller and Urey did is they introduced a spark into this bulb here. And that spark hopefully served as enough energy, just like the lightning would have back on early Earth, to recreate some molecules. And what they found was that they had amino acids, which are going to be the building blocks, the monomers of proteins, in this beaker. So what they provided was support, right? They didn't prove anything, but their experiment provided support for the idea that conditions on the lifeless, the inorganic, the primordial Earth could have allowed for the spontaneous formation of more complex organic molecules. Since the conditions on Earth are now very different presently, we don't really see these same types of reactions occurring, so we needed to create some kind of simulation. Which they so capably did. So these are just going to be some important terms to know. Very important vocabulary. It's going to be important to know in class. A monomer, right? So what you have here is just one block. And that's going to be a single compound or a building block used to make a larger compound. So you can think of it as one brick to make a house, right? You have a polymer, which is going to be many monomers formed together to form a larger compound. So if you have this polymer here, you see a bunch of these one monomers here together, chained together. So this could be one wall in one house, right? Monomer would be one brick. The polymer is going to be one wall. And then you have polymerization. So that's going to be the process of joining together compounds in order to make larger compounds. So polymerization. The creation of polymers, right? So anytime you combine a monomer together with another monomer and create a polymer, you're going through polymerization. And then you have macromolecules. There's going to be large molecules that are made when polymers join together. So you can go ahead and think of the macromolecules as a whole house, right? The polymers are going to be the wall, and the monomer would just be the one single brick. Combine all those together and you get one giant house or macromolecule. Here's a term that it might be a little more chemistry related, so if you haven't seen anything like this, make sure you're paying attention. Dehydration then synthesis. Okay? So that's two words there. The first word, dehydration. What happens when you get dehydrated, right? You have water. You don't have any water, right? So dehydration, being it as a verb, means that you're taking water away. If I was to dehydrate someone, I would take water away from them. Synthesis is going to be the process of combining two things. So when you combine dehydration and synthesis, what you get is you mean that you're creating something, you're combining two things by removing the chemical or the elements of H2O. So you remove H2O and then you combine two compounds. And this is usually used to form a larger compound. So you see the H2O leaving, and you're able to combine these two monomers, whereas before that they were separate. Hydrolysis. Okay, so this is going to be almost the opposite. Hydrolysis is going to be giving something more water, right? Hydrolysis. So hydro, water, lysis, right? You're giving it to it. The breaking down of a larger compound into smaller pieces, right? Breaking down of polymers into monomers by adding in water. So usually, almost always, enzymes are going to be needed here. Enzymes and water are going to be needed to break down that polymer. And we're going to have a video on enzymes, so if you're not quite sure what that means yet, just stay tuned and make sure you take a note of this part, so that way if you ever find out what enzyme means, hopefully you can come back in your notes and reread this section. Hopefully it makes more sense. But here you go, the hydrolysis, you're adding water and you're breaking down this polymer into two separate monomers again. And here's definitely a table. We're going to look at this table in class. If you want to fill it out now, go ahead, but we're going to look at it in class. I just wanted to show you guys, to just show you how much stuff we're going to have to learn in this one part of the unit. Now remember, we still have to do enzymes and pH and buffers, so there's going to be a lot of stuff that's on you guys to take the effort out and really hammer into your brain. So we have 4 different organic compound groups, and we're going to go through every single one of these charts because they're going to be very important and very vital that you understand these in order for us to move on. Alright, so make sure you write down any questions and bring those to class tomorrow, and we're going to take a look at this chart first thing tomorrow.